Have you ever felt overwhelmed trying to choose the right BCD, Buoyancy Control Device? Some call it Buoyancy Control Compensator. Well, you're not alone. With so many options, features, and advice flying around, it can feel like you're drowning in choices. So I made this video to help you cut through all the noise and all the marketing. Let's navigate the confusion and figure out which BCD is the best fit for your diving needs. My goal is that by the end of this video, you'll have the confidence to make an informed choice. I do want to let you know that I'm going to use my own gear as a prop, but this is not a sponsorship and I'm not advocating you buy the same gear as me. The goal here is to explain the BCD, its modern categories, how people use them, and the various features offered on the market so that you can find the best one for you. During a recent trip to a dive shop, I was reminded on how confusing it can be to sift through all the conflicting opinions about BCDs. And it shouldn't be this way. Choosing the wrong BCD isn't just a waste of money. It can hold you back as a diver or even put your safety at risk. According to the Divers Alert Network, or DAN, BCD-related issues have been a factor in many diving accidents. Common problems include picking the wrong size, not knowing how to use the controls, or choosing a BCD that has insufficient lift for your diving conditions. So to avoid dangerous mistakes, we have to break it down at its core. A BCD is simply an air bladder connected to your tank that helps you control buoyancy. And that's it. It's really just a tool to make diving easier and safer. It helps offset that negative buoyancy by adding air to give you positive buoyancy. And if you zero out your negative buoyancy, you have neutral buoyancy. Continue to add air, we'll have positive buoyancy. A BCD is really about closing the large gap of buoyancy needs. It's your main buoyancy compensator device. And from there, once you need precision, you use your lungs for minute depth changes, just with your breathing in and out. Some BCDs offer features such as harnessing, attachment points, weight pockets, weight attachment points, and tank straps, and more. The BCDs can range from a couple $100 for a basic setup or around $1,000 for more premium models. Let's start with the classic jacket style BCD. If you've gone through an open water certification course, you've probably used one. These are the go-to choice for beginners and rental shops. I don't own one of these, otherwise I'd show you. But everyone starts here, and that's how I started quite some time ago. And it's often what I would use if I rent something and I don't bring my own. These jackets are easy to use and provide great surface buoyancy. When inflated, the air fills all around you, in front of you and back, giving you a comfortable upright position at the surface, kind of acting and behaving like a life jacket. It puts you in that horizontal position and kind of feels like it's giving you a nice hug. Dive masters and instructors often prefer them for this reason, as they make it easier to monitor clients and students. It's a little bit easier to turn around and look at people out of trim, and so these things kind of put you in that more horizontal position and easier to look around you. However, this upright design, which is very good for beginners, can be a drawback underwater. The air distribution makes it harder to maintain proper trim, the ideal horizontal position for efficient diving. I know it's possible to achieve good trim in it, but it takes extra effort. And good trim is the goal of most divers, as it is the most optimal and efficient position to move through the water. Now let's talk about back inflation BCDs. These keep all the air in the back, naturally encouraging better trim and easier movement underwater. The trade-off is that they're less comfortable on the surface, as they tend to push your upper body forward. It's not a big drawback and you get used to it, and usually you'll lean back on it. But if you prioritize underwater performance, back inflation is the way to go. And finally, there's the back plate and wing, the P and W system, a minimalistic modular subcategory of back inflation BCD. These are effectively a subcategory of back inflation. They're back inflation, but they're highly customizable. These are popular with tech divers and anyone who values flexibility and potentially lower cost. You can customize a setup and suit your needs and swap out parts as your diving evolves. While BPWs take some time getting used to, especially setting it up on the first time, their simplicity and durability make them a favorite amongst experienced divers. If you read a lot of information on the internet, a lot of it will say that BPW is good for just technical divers. I do disagree. They are a little bit of overhead in terms of setup, but once you get familiar with it and utilize it more, you will see benefits for recreational diving. And really, a lot of the cost of setting it up is upfront. When you buy it, you'll have to assemble the thing, kind of get it sized to you perfectly. And then you'll have to learn how to tear it down and take it apart. But once you do it a couple times, it will feel more natural. Still, you don't need to feel pushed to buy a BPW setup over other back inflation BCDs, since they will give you a similar benefits in form and function, like this one here that I'm wearing. The key is matching your BCD to your diving evolution. What feels perfect when you're starting out might eventually feel restrictive, holding you back as your skills and confidence develop. The best BCD isn't about features, it's the one that feels like a natural extension of your body, helping you move effortlessly underwater rather than getting in your way. By understanding these details, you'll be able to pick a BCD that enhances your dives. Generally, I'd recommend renting some of these options and getting a feel from them before you buy either a BPW, jacket style, or a non-BPW back inflate system like this one. But there's more than meets the eye. A good BCD isn't just about buoyancy, it's your toolkit underwater. Let's break down the key features to look for. The wing or air bladder is a key part of your BCD because it provides lift to offset the weight of your tank and gear, tank or tanks. For most divers, using a single cylinder, the air bladder wraps around a tank, creating lift on either side, hence the wing look underwater, kind of like this. Sadly, if you're using side mount or double cylinder setups though, you'll likely need a specialized air bladder and possibly an entirely different BCD depending on your setup. That's where the backplate and wing system shines. It lets you swap out bladders without replacing the whole BCD. But this may be a feature of some BCDs in general too. You can see here that my backplate is detached from my wing, and I could buy another wing for doubles and attach it to the same backplate without having to configure this thing again. It's sized perfectly for me, and I don't need to worry about adjusting this thing. I just need to bolt it onto my backplate, which is nice. For most single tank divers, the shape of the wing isn't a big concern. Just ensure the design matches your setup for smooth balancing diving. One thing to note is sometimes they fill with air and they can push against your head, which can be annoying. So kind of look at what fabric and part of the air bladder is sitting right at the back of your neck, because that will fill with air at times and push you forward. With the air bladder, you also need to consider lift of the wing. This refers to the amount of weight the air bladder can offset. Typically, you'll see options with 30 or 40 pounds or 12 to 20 kg of lift, and that's how much weight it can offset, or rather how big the balloon or air bladder part of it is. You'll want enough to support yourself and your gear, but not so much you're overcompensating. You might think, I'll just get the biggest possible. But the problem is, if there is a device malfunction, that balloon will fill, and if it has much more lift than you need, you will unnecessarily have much more acceleration towards the surface than is needed. So it's about sizing up the lift that you need for the gear you're going to bring. For most divers, being warm water, and it's going to depend on different gear setup. A good range is 30 pounds or 13 kg to lift and compensate a single tank and wetsuit, possibly a dry suit as well. Of course, it's going to depend on your own individual needs, but that is a general number to throw out there as a baseline. There is a potential failure with all BCDs, but one thing I want to point out, and what is nice about BCDs that support swappable wings, is you can buy different wings for different setups and swap it onto your gear. This back inflation BCD that I'm wearing right now doesn't support the ability to move or swap out wings. This is meant for a very specific purpose, and if I want to do doubles with it, not going to happen. If I want to do side mount with it, not going to happen. It's meant for single tank recreational dives, that's it. So it's important to just note that there is a big difference, and if you are going to use a bunch of different kind of setups, like maybe you want to try side mounts, maybe you want to try doubles, then maybe a backplate and wing is suitable for you. I also want to quickly note that there are some inflator hoses on some BCDs, especially those travel friendly BCDs that have a regulator built in, a first stage that is supposed to be a backup in case something happens to your primary. There's a lot of complexity built into that inflator hose, and I think the whole design is terrible. I strongly recommend against those. The inflator hose is already a failure point on your BCD. Adding the extra complexity is just spelling doom, and if you need to use that thing for emergency, it's just very short. I don't like the idea of them, and I know a lot of the diving community generally don't like them either. So it's up to you. It does reduce the weight and saves you some room, but I don't think it's worth the trade-off. I'd advise just to use your inflator hose as an inflator hose and have 2 second stages on your regulator as your main setup. And of course, D-rings on your BCD are your underwater organizers. They're your attachment points that keep essential gear within reach, reducing stress and improving efficiency during your dive. So one thing you'll want to try is put the BCD on, feel those D-rings out. Like, these ones are pretty damn small, to be honest. They're kind of small, but they are still there. I can feel them. The number and placement of these rings vary between models, so consider your equipment needs when choosing. You should be able to locate them, and they should feel right when you're clipping things on and off. Just kind of take a clip onto them, clip off of them, see how that feels. A good setup typically includes 1 D-ring on both shoulders, so these 2, and 1 on your left hip. If your BCD has a crotch strap, you might find 1 additional attachment point in front and the back. This one does not have a crotch strap, but my other one does. And so you can see here that there is 2 attachment points there. 1 D-ring in the front and 1 D-ring in the back. In addition, some BCDs come with integrated weight pockets, allowing you to ditch weight in case of emergency, like this one. This one is actually an integrated weight for this very BCD. This can be a lifesaver if you need to achieve positive buoyancy fast. However, I've seen weights accidentally ejected onto coral, leaving divers panicked as they struggled with their buoyancy. When choosing a BCD, look for a secure and durable system that won't fail under pressure. Again, trying not to advertise something here, but this one is a fairly secure one. Looking at the mechanism, this is a pretty decent buckle. I mean, I don't think I will accidentally discharge this buckle. There are some things with like buttons or like little switches, and I think they're just way too easy to accidentally hit. This one is pretty decent. So what I want you to do is, if you're getting integrated weight system, is really just torque on that thing and just make sure there's no way this thing's gonna accidentally eject on you. You know, diving is sometimes unpredictable and harsh on your gear. So think about those scenarios and how it might potentially eject your weights. Personally, I prefer keeping weight minimal. When I do need extra, I use small pouches on the waist belt or trim pockets of the BCD. I generally do not like integrated weights myself. Since I bought this BCD, I've just been sitting collecting dust mostly. Not that there's anything wrong with integrated weights. I just don't prefer them myself. I like to have control of my weight. Also, I'm kind of a heavy dude, and because of that, I don't need too much additional weight. So it's gonna depend on your own body type and your gear you're bringing. And I personally prefer a waist belt where I can put the weight on my back. I always want the weight on my back. So ideally, the weight isn't great on your waist either. Sometimes it's easy to put weight on my back on the waist. It's easy. Or you can use trim pockets on the cam bands of your BCD's tank strap on the back. These can be on the side of the tank, or if you're using unbalanced like a single weight, you can put it on the center of the tank. It's the most ideal place for weight, on your back near the tank. But of course, it's not easily releasable in emergency. So that's why you really need to develop the skill of knowing the right weight to bring and be able to weight yourself properly for your diving. Sometimes your BCD has them built in, like trim pockets like this one. You can see the trim pockets here. These trim pockets are a nice perk when they're built into your BCD, or they come with your BCD, or you can just buy aftermarket ones and slap them on your cam band. But either way, they give you a lot of flexibility when we're putting that weight. I've even seen some people tie weights to your legs. It can be kind of a flexible thing where you put that weight as long as you're weighted properly. Also, speaking of cam bands, it's good to get a BCD with at least two. One lower and one upper. This is especially important as it will strap onto your cam band in two different spots, and especially if it has one of these rubber stoppers here on the cam band, it will have a nice grip around it and generally stop the tank from slipping. Because one thing you'll find is when you put your BCD on, if it only has a single cam band and you put it on when it's dry, then it could slip once you get into water. One way you can prevent that with a single cam band is making sure you dip your BCD, or at least your cam band, in water to get it wet and then strap it onto your tank. But a double cam band generally does not slip. Another nice thing that's entirely optional but is useful for single tank diving is, especially for the one that I'm wearing right now, is it has an additional loop at the very top, you can see it here, that will go around the head of the cylinder. And that also prevents it from slipping. So it's just an additional thing. You want to consider tank slipping because it's going to happen to you, and it could freak you out when it happens the first time. It happens to everybody. And it's not that uncommon that your tank slips entirely out of your cam band, and it's just going to be hanging your regulator lines to it. And it's a thing, and you'll have to have someone help you get it back on there. Kudos to you if you get it back on yourself. You know, take those cam bands seriously because it's annoying at the very least. It can take time of your dive, and it's just better if your cam bands are holding that cylinder in properly, or make sure to moisten or wetten those cam bands before you put it on the cylinder if it's a single strap. And again, some tank bands have this rubber on them that is a tank protector, and it helps protect your tank and of course give a better grip to prevent that slipping. Not all cam bands have it, but it's a nice perk, so keep an eye out for that rubber. It helps. Also, one detail many overlook is the material. Is it easy to travel with and will dry quickly for a 24-hour turn? If you're at home diving, this may not be a big deal, but if you're diving one day and flying the next, you'll appreciate a BCD that dries quickly and doesn't get smelly when packed damp. And just as an example of that, this particular BCD will stay wet a little bit longer than this one, which is made entirely of plastic. Not counting durability at all, but there are things to consider and how fast you want the material to dry. And on that note, I also want to advocate that you never put your BCD in the sunlight to dry them fast. That will wear out the material, no matter what kind of material it is. Just keep them out of sunlight. Lastly, let's talk about pockets. I prefer streamlined, pocketless BCD and use leg-mounted pockets instead. You can get the strap-on leg pockets for easier access underwater. I find getting into those is so much easier than like the jacket style pockets that are like up here and you have to like zip and everything falls out. I mean, you could have that on your leg pockets too, but it's a little bit easier to just put your hand into those legs, grab what you need and zip it back up. If you do go this route, or in pockets in general, make sure that the pockets have D-rings inside. So that way, when you put your gear into the pocket, you can clip it onto the D-ring. So you have multiple items in that pocket, or the pocket accidentally unzips, you won't lose anything. Those D-rings help a lot. Remember, the ideal BCD aligns with your specific diving style and needs. A cave diver might prioritize a streamlined profile and minimal but necessary attachment points, while an underwater photographer might value easy access pockets and a stable platform. These features aren't just add-ons, they're essential components that shape your underwater experience. So, you've picked your BCD, whether it's a jacket style or a back inflate model, and on paper, it seems perfect. But then, you hit the water and realize something feels off. You thought it was a great BCD, but once you're diving, you find you just can't quite get comfortable with it. Maybe the shoulders feel a little too tight. It wiggles annoyingly during your dive, or worse, it's poking you in all the wrong places. Suddenly, what seemed like an ideal choice becomes a hassle. The truth is, comfort is key. Your BCD needs to fit your body type, diving environment, and equipment configuration. A BCD that fits you perfectly for warm water diving might be too restrictive with a thick wetsuit or even a dry suit. Similarly, a setup that works for recreational diving might not be suitable for technical dives with multiple tanks. Quick adjustment straps are great for dialing in that perfect fit, but they can also loosen during a dive, causing annoying wiggle and messing with your trim. So I recommend avoiding quick adjustments, any kind, and going for a less dynamically adjustable system or webbing, where you just spend a bit more time when you buy the thing to get it just right and don't mess with it again. If your BCD is only for you and no one else, I prefer to have a lot harder time readjusting itself, and I can just adjust it once. That way I never need to touch it again. I'm kind of lazy like that, and I'm sure you are too. And worse, those quick adjustments just will loosen on you in the worst possible situations and just create an annoying wiggle. So take your time adjusting the straps before your dive, making sure they're snug, but not too tight. You can kind of see how this thing is. It's snug, but not too tight. Ensure the D-rings are positioned where you can reach them easily below your shoulders and comfortably where the buckle sits comfortably near the center. And the waist buckle sits comfortably near the center. Then start trying on your BCD without your wetsuit. You should have about 6 inches of extra webbing at each adjustment point. If you're doing one of your own BPW do-it-yourself kind of style backplate, then make sure that you cut the excess and burn the edges to prevent fraying. You can see that I cut this myself, maybe not super great, but what's important is to burn the edges. When inflated, the BCD should fit snugly around you without squeezing or pushing into you uncomfortably. Remember, the top part is probably the one that annoys most people. Now put on your wetsuit or dry suit and reassess. It's gotta feel comfortable while that's on. Ask yourself if it's comfortable. Can you move freely? A good fit is crucial to avoid frustration underwater. Test to see if you can reach your upper and lower dump valves. Those will be very important. Get a good feel for their positions, not only so you can easily find them, but how they feel when you tug on them, that they're sturdy, they're not gonna just easily rip off when you try searching for them, and that they're easy to find. These ones are quite nice because it has a big handle on them, and they're just really quick and easy to locate. But really just spend a little bit of time and see how long it takes you to find those. Those are very important controls and you use them often. And here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. There's also men's and women's BCDs. Not all BCDs have this option, but some do. and are designed a little bit differently, and for good reason. Women-specific models have narrower shoulder straps, more curves around the chest area, I'm hoping for obvious reasons, and higher position chest buckles. These designs can make a huge difference in comfort for female divers. We don't need to model everything for just men, but it really depends on your shape. Some women, like my wife, may be fine with non-female models, so give it a try if you are a female and see which one feels more comfortable to you. That comfort is very important. It might feel perfect on land, but behave differently underwater. Pay attention on a test dive to how it affects your trim and stability. If your dive shop is local, they might be willing to let you test dive with the BCD before you buy it, which is really awesome opportunity, but you have to ask about it. Once you go diving with it, check again. Can you reach all the D-rings? Do all the pockets feel good? When you open and close it, how does it feel? Check the detachable weight area. Does it seem like that those could easily eject? When you inflate the thing, does it push against your neck? Does it feel like the tank is easy to slip on the cam band? And check the power inflator on your BCD. You'll be using it a lot. Check all the buttons and feel like, okay, this feels comfortable. How easy does it seem to access? How is the length on your body? And does it seem like something you'll be able to continue to use and operate in an emergency? For some, a big concern might also be the packability of the BCD. How well does it break down and pack into a bag and easy for travel? Some BCDs break down very well, and BPWs literally break down to their bare components, with some assembly required when you get to your location and get home. By taking the time to understand these nuances, you'll be able to choose a BCD that truly fits your diving experience and safety. It's important to note that your BCD is more than just a piece of equipment. It's critical to your buoyancy underwater. You will want to take special care and consideration into its failure points and maintenance needs, and where lack of might lead to a possible malfunction on you while at depth. Some considerations I want you to think about before you go buy a BCD is how much metal is there. All of that metal will rust over time. Even marine grade steel and aluminum will have some wear. You'll have to make sure to clean those pieces thoroughly with fresh water whenever they hit salt water, and you'll have to do it carefully. This is especially important to the inflator hose mechanism, which tends to be a popular failure point along with dump valves. Further, consider any visible buckles, seams, or bungees. This particular one I'm using has bungees. That's not great. These are all potential parts that can break. Observe the sturdiness of all of the pieces on it. Check the stitching. Is it double stitched with high quality thread, which is much more durable? Is the buckle cheap looking plastic? Prefer metal and minimal buckles as you can get. Sometimes less is more in this case. The BCD I'm wearing right now has a particular buckle right here. This thing is kind of amazing for getting out of water, and it just makes it easy to take this thing off and get onto a boat if someone's helping, or some boats require you take it off before you get into the dinghy. There are some use cases where it's a nice convenience, but it's also a failure point. If you look at it, it's just plastic. It's not even metal. That is a failure point. While I'm not knocking this thing, I obviously own one, and I think it's a pretty good BCD nonetheless. But I have to admit, it's a failure point, and so that is a consideration. If I'm doing a technical dive, this may not, or I'm going into a cave, this is probably not a failure point I want on my gear. This is a recreational BCD, and it's good for non-deep dives. Another thing to ask is, how about those D-rings? You'll use them a lot diving, and sometimes fairly roughly, and you want those to be sturdy. You don't want to accidentally rip off, so spend a little bit of time tugging on those and just make sure it's good quality and where it's connected isn't going to easily rip off. Does the wing have bungees on it? As mentioned earlier, but I really want to take it home, is the bungees. If those bungees fail, your wing may not perform as well as you hope. Those bungees are there to keep the air in a specific shape, and if it can't keep that shape, it may not work as effectively. So it's just important to consider that is a failure point for your buoyancy. This particular one has some bungees on it, while my BPW does not. The stronger and more sturdy these failure points are, the less worry you'll have about your BCD. There is good reason why the minimalist BPW is favored amongst the technical diving community, because it is so simple, it has less failure points in general. Another popular feature from BPW setup is the fact that it usually uses a single continuous webbing that runs the full course of the BCD from the harness that you strap in. So just to show you, this whole thing is one single webbing that runs through the whole course of the backplate. It's one webbing. There is no place where it's tied together. It's a very simple and reliable design, of course reducing those potential failure points considerably. Further, some fabrics and models have undergone more rigorous testing and perhaps coating to better withstand that UV sunlight radiation, also abrasion and saltwater exposure, which can be a perk if you trust the certification process that is undergone. Also, as a side note, I just want to advertise that you should clean the inside of your BCD with some safe antibacterial cleaner too, to prevent buildup of nastiness before long-term storage. A lot of things can build up in those air sacs, and so just cleaning them out maybe once, maybe twice a year is usually sufficient to keep anything too bad from building up. A well-maintained, durable BCD isn't just about convenience, it's an investment in your safety and peace of mind underwater. And if you're also in the market for fins, check out this video here next on choosing the perfect scuba fins for your style in a very similar structure to this video. Until next time,